here somewhere, and we'll welcome her to help with answering any questions or any issues from a historical perspective as well. There she is. Welcome, Mary Jo. For our agenda today, we do not have any voting items on the agenda. Today is really designed for us to have some good, robust conversations about a series of announced opportunities that came through the mayor's state of Metro, in particular, $30 million further for affordable housing. This builds on over $55 million that you all already allocated in year one funding to affordable housing. So that will bring our total up to over $85 million of affordable housing funding, and then another 50 for homelessness funding as well. We'll spend time talking about those. But before we get further into the conversation, I want to recognize a very special guest that we have here today with us. We want to spend a little bit of time talking about year two investment priorities overall, and I want to welcome our mayor, Mayor John Cooper, to speak to you all about a couple of opportunities and to thank you for your service. Yes, Mayor Cooper. Oh, let me see if I know how to do this because I don't think I got the back one. Oh, I don't see. I see. Sorry, Mayor. Apologize for that. Could it be any of those? Mayor, does that work?
What do we think? Oh, very good. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody, and happy 615 Day. It's kind of a Nashville thing, 615. I just want to recognize and thank State Representative Harold Love, who's here. It's always great to have him here. And also Council Members Gamble and Johnston and Sepulveda. Thank you for your service on this great committee. And Mary Jo, thank you for normally our presiding officer. So I'm very grateful for the important work you all have been undertaking in representing Nashville. And thank you for overseeing the effective allocation of the CARES Act and American Rescue Plan funds that we've received. You know, this committee has authorized $129 million already. And let's recognize that it is helping every corner of our community. And that goes from replenishing the fleet and equipment for our emergency services to substantial investments in creating affordable housing, to bolstering social services, to addressing homelessness, and getting our unhoused neighbors stable housing options, and also to new investments in behavioral health, rental assistance, community safety, child care access, and legal support for eviction prevention and immigration support services. These funds are making Nashville a better place for residents in many, many ways. You are making Nashville a better place for our residents. Now, we are better and stronger because of your diligent work, and our community is recovering from the pandemic. So it's fitting that on 615 Day, to celebrate the city we all know and love, that let's get on to more exciting news that will affect every Nashvilleian. So today you're going to hear about our proposal that I outlined in the State of Metro address, a $30 million affordable housing request, which brings our investment in ARPA-derived funds in housing to over $85 million. And a request for an unprecedented $50 million investment in helping our most vulnerable neighbors, unhoused Nashvilleians. Thank you for your careful consideration of these requests. They are extremely important to the future of Nashville. And with them being successfully implemented, I think we're going to just be building a much stronger and greater community. Now, I'm also proposing a major expansion of an initiative that we launched last year, and that is participatory budgeting. All across Davidson County, Nashvilleians will choose how to invest in their neighborhoods. And not only participatory budgeting, but I would also like to talk about a funding request upcoming for an exciting new project at Burris Hall in Fisk. Now, the first initiative, participatory budgeting, began as a pilot program in the Bordeaux and North Nashville neighborhood. And as the folks there will tell you, it was an enormous success. Community members proposed projects and initiatives for Metro to undertake, and then voted on which to fund with tax dollars. And over 500 Bordeaux community members voted, and they chose 8 projects to fund out of a $2 million fund that the council made available for this work. Now, those projects range from a new pavilion at Bordeaux Gardens Park to air conditioning at the Luby Community Center gym. That's going to be an important consideration on days like today. To a better playground for Hartman Park, to additional bus shelters, to a new set of 6 speed bumps as part of a traffic calming project. Now, residents weighed in to choose the projects that would create the most impact for themselves and their families. Now, I am today going to be requesting $20 million of American Rescue Plan funds to expand this successful program to benefit the entire county. ARP funds are dedicated to helping cities recover from the once-in-a-generation pandemic, and here in Nashville, we have tested a system for doing exactly that in a way that gets communities with the most need they help, and they can get it fast. Now, we've developed a tiered system so we can allocate that $20 million to communities based on need, prioritizing the underserved neighborhoods with populations that are the most vulnerable. And we are helping to build the resilience and social fabric in our neighborhoods so we can support our neighbors in the many, many years ahead by reducing social vulnerability. Now, this is a revolutionary grassroots approach to budgeting. And we did it in Bordeaux and in North Nashville. It was the first of its kind in Nashville. It allows our residents to go deeper to connect with their neighborhood's priorities with public spending. Now, it's the kind of Nashville that we envision, a Nashville that works for all. And so the Participatory Budgeting Initiative, I predict, is going to be one of the most popular and successful actions ever taken by this group or this council. Now, I'm also asking for $10 million of ARP money for Burris Hall. Now, Burris Hall has stood at the corner of 16th Avenue North and Meharry since 1935. And this 12,000 square foot building has served as a classroom, dormitory, and an administrative office space. But it was last utilized in the 1990s. So the foundation of Burris Hall is remarkable, but the building is in substantial need of renovation. Now, the city and Fisk envision a partnership together that transforms Burris Hall into an innovation incubator facility with this same 12,000 square feet of flexible space for workshops, classes, community engagement, innovation, and service. The space will host tech boot camps as well as programs including mentoring, classes, workshops, and events. The facility will serve as a jumping off point for ideas that entrepreneurs can spin out into self-sustaining businesses for further private investment. Now, similar models are housed at top universities throughout the nation, and it is a way of making the digital economy work for Nashvillians. And we hope that this item will be brought before this committee and that you will consider it favorably. Now, I've encouraged the committee to continue to look for ways to help transform Nashville into a city for everyone. And you are doing that. Look at the good projects, the great things that have been committed to by this committee and that we have gotten going in a short period of time. I want to thank you for your service. Thank you for your consideration. And let's celebrate the 615 Day here in Nashville with a determination and a plan to really make our city succeed and be a city that works for everybody. To harness the opportunity of the digital economy for all of our young people and for all of our communities. And with participatory budgeting, also to put the money in the hands of each neighborhood and community all across the county, and let's get started with really investing back in our neighborhoods. So with that, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mary Jo. Thank each of you for being here in this service. I guess we're sort of, it started in the hardest days of the pandemic and continues today, and we're going to use the opportunity of the city to make us a better city. And thank you for your work in doing that, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mayor Cooper. I'm not sure that there was a better way for us to kick off our discussion around your two priorities than to have had the chance to hear directly from Mayor Cooper about the opportunities before us. In year two, we have $129 million to allocate. And in front of you, among your materials, there's a staple piece that has our guiding principles. These have not changed from last year when we spent some time kicking off looking at them in the past. You do have those, and then attached to it is the preliminary allocations that'll be before you in at least the next 3 months ahead. Our thought is that over the course of this month and next month hopefully we'll be in a position to consider some approvals and authorizations. We will look at the affordable housing $30 million plan in more detail and the $50 million homelessness opportunity. That will take us through our June and July agendas. Come August, we would look at the requests that the mayor just put forward in front of you. The participatory budgeting again, very important to think about. It'll be countywide, but it'll be done with a weighting and an eye towards social vulnerability. So some neighborhoods based on the social vulnerability index will have more opportunities, and some neighborhoods will have less. And so we'll spend some time in August really kind of looking through that methodology and understanding that better, but with the key intent of better knitting our social fabric and our communities together to address longstanding challenges that we've had across our county. So this, I think, will be a very exciting opportunity for us. We will also in August bring for you similarly for discussion and for consideration the Burris Hall opportunity, the Entrepreneurship Center with Fisk University. And so that will already take up a fair amount of the funds that are available. And that's why I wanted to make sure we started off with a good conversation about our priorities. Of the remaining funds right now, there are sort of two others items that we've identified that could be consistent with the community-based priorities that have come before us, and we could look at them potentially in the September timeframe if you'd like, which is MDHA is seeking for the opportunity to do a demonstration around social services supports in its communities. That demonstration would be actually for us to put together a case to lobby HUD for the U.S. federal government Housing and Urban Development Department for us to lobby for ongoing funding for social services. And so that would be a demonstration project to discuss come September. And Metro Action Commission, I know Dr. Cynthia Kroom came and talked to you all as an expert when we were talking about affordable child care. There's about $2 million worth of kind of small capital needs that are in her world of Head Start programs, and we thought we'd come through and talk a little bit further about those. That leaves, along with $500,000 for reporting and reviewing, just as we've done funded in this first year, that leaves about 14.8, almost 15 for us to then continue to look for opportunities for, and obviously any of these will be considerations. With that, I want to open this up for discussion from you all and hear your thoughts on if you have preferences or thoughts about how we move forward, especially because this will bring forward conversations for us all the way through August and potentially into September. I wanted to make sure we had your input and feedback on that before we get into the two specific plans. Yes, Sarah, let me.
A preliminary question. There have been several presenters that we've had, in prior weeks where we were getting sort of close to the end of the first allocation, and we kind of encouraged them because they had a fairly long period of time that, they might want to come back. It might be helpful if we could get a list of kind of who was in that bucket, because ultimately when there's an amount left, I think that we want to revisit since we've encouraged them to make a second appearance.
Absolutely, and we had much of that type of opportunity also in mind for those remaining funds. I'm going to turn on the admin table. Mary Jo, if you want to speak to all the ways we've had requests come through.
Yes, thank you. I will do that. It was predominantly our last group because they were the ones that several wanted 3 years, and we said, really, we want to fund it 2 years, and we'll come back and look at that. So I'll put together what year 3 looks like, along with, if you recall, that 13%, I'll call haircut that they had to take to see if they need that. As well as the other list will be some of the other, I'll call them miscellaneous. That's not a indictment on priorities, but I've gotten a lot of different email requests of saying, hey, can you present this to the committee? When could I talk about this? Some of them are smaller projects, individual. It might be a school here, a group here, a nonprofit. So I'll put together that entire list. Sometimes they didn't give me dollar amounts. So one of the things that I'm working on now that I have some extra time that I wasn't expecting before the July meeting is getting a dollar amount from all of those folks so that we can see really with the roughly 15 million that we have remaining, what of that has existing requests to come to before the committee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you
Thank you, Councilmember.
for providing this information about the year plan 2, I guess, priorities. And my question is, we did a community survey to help with the community needs, and we did at least touch on, I believe, the top 3: affordable housing, childcare. Don't recall what the third one
Homelessness.
was. Homelessness, thank
Yes.
you. But there were other priorities on that list, workforce development being one of them, and I don't see that on this list of priorities, or don't understand or know if that would fall under the community priorities listing. But in looking at, we did do small business recovery, but there has been a lot of calls and interest for support for workforce development, whether through Music City Careers or Urban League and Nashville State. Is there room for us to consider that within this list of priorities for year 2?
Yes, there is, and again, it's limited room, which is why we're putting all this forward now so that there's opportunities for us to make determinations in the months ahead with that context, right? And that is, that would be in that $14.8 million bucket right now, which would include the continuation opportunities, would include additional, and as it's noted, it does say community priorities in there because I think we would want to have the preference going forward of using that ongoing as a guide. Oh, I see Councilmember Sepulveda. Keep wanting to undo the ones where you actually sit normally.
Oh, got it. No worries. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions and some comments. I agree with my colleagues. I do think that we actively took time to work on the survey and put it out there, and I want to make sure that the survey priorities are taken into account. I mean, we all know that several items get presented before us, and it is up to us whether we want to go in that direction or not. So there's always room for our priorities and the community's priorities, I would say. I do think that there are a couple of things that are being proposed that are great. I do have several questions. I guess the first one having to do with the homelessness ARP request. I don't remember seeing this in our Homelessness Planning Council committee, this being sent in this detail. Can we get that sent to the council for them to weigh in on and take a look at?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, there are no votes today. This is the opportunity for call it a first vetting and a first opportunity for questions and answers around all of this. So yes.
And then can you remind me of the amount for FISC? Is it 10?
10 million, yes. And again, there's a printout. The first page says guiding principles, but the second page has a spreadsheet behind it that.
Guiding principle.
Sorry, I know there's quite a bit of paper there.
Is there going to be more information
Yes.
on that?
Absolutely. So today we're going to spend some time talking through the $30 million affordable housing proposal and about the homelessness proposal for $50 million today. No voting. But so imagine it's sort of a two-parter. We'll talk about that further as well in July, and at that point in time, we'll start to seek authorizations on those plans. In September, we would have a conversation about the participatory budgeting around recovery and social fabric, and then the secondary, which again, in many ways is putting the community's priorities into the community's, the dollars in the hands for the community's priorities, as well as Burris Hall. So that I would look towards an August, September timeframe, and similarly be write-ups, detailed conversations, opportunities for Q&A on those very specific points.
Got it. So if all of these administration requests get funded, how much will we have left over?
So it would be 110 of the 129 million. And again, the spreadsheet outlines that there is also a small request coming further around MDHA and a small request coming further from Metro Action Commission that we'd like to bring forward also for consideration. Again, these are all things that align with the top 3 priorities coming from the community, but putting this forward for discussion.
So I have a specific question on one of the requests. Whenever you want to get to it, if there's no general questions before that. If not, I could go straight into it.
That's fine. And particularly if it's for housing or homelessness, we'll have plenty of opportunity to do that as we move further into the agenda. Okay, great. Yes, Councilmember Johnston.
I was just ready, not that I was rushing, but I was going to ask specific questions about these different requests. So I guess I'll wait until we get into the deep dive into these 2 things. So.
Okay, very good. Any other questions about priorities? Again, this is a straw man for you all to be thinking about and reacting to, both as you make any decisions going forward about any of the year 2 allocations. And if you recall, we did something similar back in year 1, and it was just meant to be a guide to help you all through decision making, to have a sense of where some allocations and requests were going to be sponsored by the administration, and where there is further opportunity for deliberations beyond that, of course, too. Okay, very good. Well, with that, why don't we move on in our agenda and go ahead and have a conversation. Oh, yes, sorry, Councilmember Sepulveda.
Sorry, one quick thing. Hazard pay was something that they had asked us to hear before the committee. Is that something that we could get scheduled?
We can certainly include that in the list that Mary Jo Wiggins mentioned around all the other requests that have come forward. And certainly if that's the will of the committee to entertain, we certainly can look at that further. Thank you for raising that question. All right, she captured that. Good. Any other questions? All right. Well, with that, then I'm going to invite our Director of Housing to come, if you don't mind, Angie Hubbard, who helped author this plan. I think it'll be incredibly helpful to have her go through if you don't mind, I'm going to suggest she goes through an outline of what's in front of you in terms of the $30 million housing request. And Angie, if you'll give me a moment, there's a few different options on which microphone you might have. I'm just going to turn a bunch of them on and see what happens. You tap that one there, see if it, there, it sounds like it's on.
Yes, I think. So good afternoon. My name's Angie Hubbard, as Kristen mentioned. I joined Metro Planning in the Housing Division on January 3rd. And my role in our new Housing Division is actually one of the direct outcomes of the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations. I want to thank you first for the ARP allocations from year 1 that have already been directed toward housing, and we've got big news for the $20 million that went to the Barnes Fund. Ashley's been working hard, and we have some great applications that have been received, and that will come through council in late summer. That will get us, again, maybe close to 900 units, so we're super excited about that, and the other initiatives. So as we worked on our year 2 funding request, our priorities continue to be implementing the recommendations of the Affordable Housing Task Force. So everything that's proposed were mentioned in our task force report. But I have some other overarching goals that I wanted to go through before I get into the plan to give a little context. These are one-time funds, we acknowledge that. And so we need to utilize these in the most impactful way to make significant progress in tackling our housing challenges. But we need to be bold and creative. But most importantly, we need to acknowledge and address longstanding housing inequities. We can't create housing for all until we understand what those barriers are that many in our community encounter and that keep them from getting the housing they need to access or from keeping the housing that they have. How these programs are structured are to leverage these funds with private and other public dollars, align the ecosystem of many mission-driven nonprofits and other partners in our community that are working on these things, and strengthen the infrastructure so we can have long-term sustainability out of these programs that we're looking to create, and then to create opportunities that can be replicated. So first, I would like to start with Pathways to Equitable Homeownership. We're requesting $10 million. Racial inequity has been prevalent in our past and our present, especially in housing. The history of redlining is still reflected in our communities today. Even with fair housing policies that are intended to protect our vulnerable communities, many Black and brown Nashvillians still face housing discrimination. This chronic disenfranchisement and disinvestment in the communities have left generational wealth divides and have deepened racial wealth gaps for Black and brown households. These issues are only exacerbated by the housing pressures in Davidson County and being part of a high-growth market over the last decade. An example of this disparity, 62% of all white households in Davidson County own homes. Only 38% of Black households in Davidson County own their homes. If 62% of Black households in Davidson County own their homes, we need an additional 17,500 Black homeowners. If 62% of Hispanic homeowners own their homes, we need an additional 5,800 Hispanic homeowners. So we are proposing programs that would create pathways to homeownership that includes a whole complex level. And I will stop here because when you think about building a house, you need a whole lot of tools. Same when you build a toolkit to address the complexity of housing. To create financial literacy and mortgage counseling so that people become mortgage ready. It's not just that we create housing opportunities, but that pathway means starting and meeting someone where they are and getting them on that pathway. Making down payment assistance available, as well as creating new housing stock. There are some great programs that have already been created around the country. One is by the Mortgage Bankers Association that has brought together a cross-section of partners, housing counseling agencies, mortgage bankers, real estate professionals, housing developers. So this would be a real community, local partnership-driven effort to identify where we should plug in our ARP dollars and leverage that with other dollars that are already existing in our community. And I will add that we can't talk about addressing housing equities without talking about creating equitable opportunities for the creation of housing and how we can create partnerships with the Urban League and other organizations that are already out there. And so we have the partners, we need to bring them all together, and we need to create this infrastructure so that once we're through the ARP funds, we can look to other places where we can say we've got this infrastructure, we know how to make this work in our county. The next opportunity, aging in place housing and opportunities, we are requesting $8 million. The number and proportion of our population over the age of 65 continues to grow. Our older adults are especially vulnerable to the pressures of a heated housing market. And we must take care of our seniors by offering opportunities to age in their home or within their communities where their social networks exist. Funds would be used to create housing programs to help our older adults age in place, as well as to create housing opportunities such as home repair and accessibility modifications to make homes safe. This could supplement existing or expand existing opportunities, make renovations that allow for multi-generational housing or on-site care, creating new housing in or near communities with high concentrations of older adults at risk of displacement. We would develop this program in coordination of a stakeholder working group that focuses on the needs and challenges of older adults. The AARP actually has a good toolkit and has asked Nashville to sign on about becoming an age-friendly community, so we have some good models to follow. And we would deploy this through our partner organizations with oversight of our housing division. The third program, Innovative Housing Solutions Pilot Program, and pilot, that's a low P, it's not a payment in lieu of tax, it's a demonstration, requesting $7 million. Traditionally, we've created our local programs after our state and federal, and these are often limit creativity and innovation. We need to explore a variety of non-traditional mechanisms to create more affordable housing options that are responsive to the needs of our residents. And also to allow that creativity to help when we want to activate Metro-owned property to create new housing. So we are proposing the funds to expand affordable housing that substantially advances resiliency and sustainability, or to convert garages and ADUs to long-term affordable housing where they're already allowed, for projects that create alternative ownership structures like co-housing or cooperatives, things that traditionally have not been done in Nashville because we really haven't had the development or the lending community that really know how to undertake this type of work. But now that we're such a national market, that we do have developers that are in this space that know how to do this. We have lenders that know how to help finance this. So we feel like this is a great opportunity to start piloting some new ways that then we can get them into the more traditional lanes of funding downstream. We would make this funding available through a competitive process and oversee the administration of that program. And then our last proposed funding request is for $5 million. And I'll go back to our Affordable Housing Task Force report to high priority recommendation to continue to support the Envision efforts undertaken by MDHA. As you know, they've been working on Envision Casey, and this $5 million would help facilitate the development of 5th and Summer and Boscobel 5 and 6 to gap finance and gap fill the escalating construction costs that have impacted building timelines, and then help them to accelerate that construction pipeline. And Dr. White is here for specific questions if you have any, and they would of course oversee this project. So I know I ran through that very quickly. I'm going to ask my team in the back because I am woefully unprepared with a pen that writes. So if there are any questions, if you all please jot those down so I can make sure and follow up.
First, I saw Councilmember Gamble's hand go up first, then Johnston, and then Sepulveda, if that's all right. And I think you have your hand up too. It seems like everyone. We'll get through everyone. All right. Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation today. My questions revolve around the impact. These do look like well thought out plans for how to address affordable housing in our city, but we don't have any information on how this funding will impact overall. For example, the $10 million for the pathways to equitable home ownership, the stats of the 62% of white households in Davidson County own homes, and while 38% of black households own homes. How would this $10 million impact? I mean, what would be the impact of the $10 million? How many black and brown homeowners would you expect that would result as a part of this program? And really, those questions go for each of the programs.
And as we work between now and July, we'll work on the fidelity of getting those numbers for you as we refine these programs.
All right. Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. One of my questions was along the lines of Council Lady Gamble, which is basically the accountability of it. What are your success metrics? What are your expectations? And then every other organization that's come before us that has asked for anything. We have required actually a lot of reporting very regularly and some success metrics. And then if it's not successful, that money comes back to us to then be reallocated. A lot of these projects here seem decently long-term, where once it's allocated, if you're in a situation where it's not successful, that money would come back to us. It would be outside, I would think, the amount of time that we have with ARP funds. Am I making sense? Like, we've got a certain amount of time that it has to be allocated. If it comes back to us after that time period has expired, we lose the ability to maybe reallocate it, I'm not sure, but certainly probably to have any sort of accountability around it. These are big asks. These are larger asks than we're typically used to, and usually our eyes kind of pop open when someone does come with a big one, and we've got like 5 in a row. I get the pathways to equity. That I love that idea. I want to teach people to fish, not give them the fish. And so that to me is a sustainable activity, so I agree with that. The aging in place, I agree with as well. A $7 million pilot for innovative housing is a little out there, to be honest, to wrap your head around that large of a dollar amount for a pilot program with some things where you're talking about converting garages and dadoos and stuff like that. Envision Casey, I'm not going to question. I think that's a fantastic thing. One of the things, so I guess you were already going to be dealing with the reporting requirements, accountability, success metrics based off of Council Lady Gamble's comments. Partner organizations are referred to in here throughout. Who are those partner agencies? What type of fees are they going to be taking out of this? So if we always ask that of United Way, I want to know how much money is actually going to the project versus the execution of the project. But who have you identified these partners, and can we get a list of those organizations?
Yes, absolutely. Before we return back in July, we will have more refined information for you to look at ahead of time so that you can see what those are as we pull our working groups together. And in addition to whatever reporting requirements we have to provide to the city and to this body, we are working on public-facing dashboards for our housing programs for our website that we're building, so that there's always accountability just to the public at large on how we're producing.
Councilmember Sepulveda.
Yes, 3 questions now with that one. When would that website be public? What's the estimate on that?
This summer.
This summer, okay. And how many of these blind items were recommendations by the task force?
All of them are folded in, whether they're high priority or folded in other parts of the task force. Equity is a guiding principle, as well as resiliency, and that's why the focus on equity through this is to address, specifically the guiding principle of the task force is to address historic racial inequities in our city. So that's what led to particularly the pathways to homeownership. And then there are, and I don't have the task force report too, but I can give you citations out of there or refer you to the places where we talked about utilizing ADUs to create affordable housing, how we need to help people stay in their home and prevent displacement, which is what the aging in place or aging in communities are geared to.
And then where would these funds live? Would they live in the Barnes Fund?
No. These would live within the Housing Division's budget. The Barnes Fund is another tool that awards funds to nonprofits for development. This is another tool in addition to the Barnes Fund.
I guess my question is why it wouldn't live in the Barnes Fund?
Because the Barnes Fund is very restricted in its legislation on how and what they use their funds for, and this is more for collaborative opportunities. And there's a possibility we could do RFPs with for-profit developers, and the Barnes Fund strictly grants to nonprofits.
Okay, Representative Love.
Thank you, sir, very much. Looking at the pathways to equitable home ownership, the 10 million, is it possible to get a breakdown of the dollar amounts spent on these individual segments. For example, I'd like to know how much is being spent on fair housing education as compares to how much is being put in for down payment assistance. Right? That way we can see
Absolutely.
that it's going to really get to what
Yes.
some councilmen have asked, like how many people will be helped, because we certainly don't want to have, not that you have it, but $1 million going toward education when it could maybe be done with 100,000.
Correct. Yes.
And then the other 900,000 going toward down payment assistance. So if you could provide a breakdown of how much would be allocated for these various sections, that'd be helpful.
Perfect.
Thank
you.
Sarah Finley.
Yeah, and a lot of my questions have already been asked, but one thing that has been sort of a recurring theme since we started this is just sort of a recognition that the amounts that we have available to us through this program are extraordinary. And I think we all share the hope that when it's all spent, that it didn't just disappear and not have any sustainable impact on our city, because I don't think it will come our way again for
Absolutely.
the foreseeable future. And when I look at these priorities, I mean, these are priorities that I think they're certainly I think priorities for all of us. They're priorities that were reflected in the survey. But I think that trying to look at them as you come up with your detail about what is going to be sustainable. If money goes out to partners to provide education services and counseling and things like that, you know, there may never be a concrete result from that. I'm not saying those things are not worthwhile, but in proportion. But these numbers are big enough that we should have something that we really can show for it.
Absolutely.
And so I know now it's at a high level of description, but when we talk about the possibility of creating units or doing conversions or providing gap funding, it's like, what does that mean?
Right.
Because we want something that 20 years from now we can say our city's problem was alleviated, and we had, you know, this to show for it. Not we spent a lot of money, but the numbers are still the same. Because to me, the dollars are important, but how we use the resources is even, you know, more important. I just want to encourage us to use resources that may not be costly. For instance, if we're going to provide a lot of financial literacy education, there are a lot of financial institutions in this town that our city should call upon. They have that information. They have that ability. They have community reinvestment obligations. And they should show up for the city and help with these types of programs without charging a lot through a third-party vendor. That's just an example. But anyway, I would just encourage to think about what is all this going to look like 10 years from now? I think that's a really important part of the filter as you prepare your detail.
Yes, thank you, because we do want to move the needle substantially with these funds for long-term affordability creation. And a lot of what you were talking about, those softer side of things, are really leverage that I see coming in, where we come in on the harder sticks and bricks side of things. And so we'll build that out in more detail before your July meeting.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you. This is a little bit for more of like logistics of how I would prefer to see this handled. Instead of this being a $20 million request, I'd like for it to be handled as 4 separate requests. Yeah.
Noted. Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? I will note you have time. Again, this is just the introduction of this, along with making sure we've captured all those questions and bring forward documentation. Let's say you walk out of here or in the next few weeks, please just, if you can, for both Mary Jo and I, send us those questions. We'll make sure that they're captured and documented and followed upon. And yes, Representative Love.
Thank you. And I do want to say, I did not say it first, thank you for this presentation. I get calls so many times from constituents who remember Metro having programs years ago that would allow you to get your home weatherized or get some work done with the contingency that you stayed in it. And so many of our seniors do need these type of funds to be able to stay in their homes, to weatherize them, to be able to get the roof fixed. And so this will go a long way, but just wanted to say thank you for that inclusion in this housing piece. Thank you.
All right, with no further question, thank you very much, Angie. Appreciate you joining us today. Again, I want to recognize that we do have MDHA, Dr. Troy White, and some of his team back there. We also have Renee Pratt, who's our Director of Social Services here too. So as we move into these next round of questions, MDHA is also a really important partner for our conversation on homelessness further too. And I want to encourage you all to feel comfortable in asking questions back there too, especially now that I know how to turn on the microphone back there, right? So at this point in time, why don't we move over to homelessness? And I'm going to ask, I think we have a sort of a team-based approach here, perhaps, to present it. Please come on up. I'll warn you all, that microphone works, that one does not, but this one does. So if somebody wants to come sit up here too, you're more than welcome to join me over here, or right here, April. All right. Perhaps you could start by introducing yourselves and sharing anything you'd like about your background while I turn you all on. And again, Jay, that microphone won't work, so maybe if you want to put the one between you and Stacy, then you all can appropriately share that. Thank you. Stacy?
Hi, I'm Stacy Horn-Koch. I am a consultant that's currently working here in Nashville and specifically on homelessness and affordable housing. And my background is the last 30 years in homelessness and background before that in mental health. But I've worked as the director of housing for the state of Louisiana. I was Mayor Mitchell Andrews, director of homeless policy for the city of New Orleans. And in Atlanta, I helped I actually set up the continuum of care there and worked on their 10-year plan to end homelessness, was part of making New Orleans the first city in the country to end veterans homelessness or declare functional zero. So I've done a lot of work around housing and homelessness.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jay Survey, also known as Chief Survey from the Office of Emergency Management, but have been detailed, as we say in the military, detailed to be the interim director of the Homeless Impact Division over the past 8 months. 27 years of experience here in Nashville, and currently serving, like I said, as the interim director, and enjoying every moment I have to help those that are in need.
Thank you, Jay. April?
Hi, I'm April Calvin, 25 years. I like to say that I'm super young, so it's hard for me to even say 25 years of service and addressing street-level homelessness. One thing that I do want to add to my resume here recently is about 3.5 years ago, I went to Houston, Texas, and helped train programs and United Way funded initiatives on how to end homelessness, on programs and services that we were doing here in Nashville. Today, actually yesterday, I received an article saying that Houston, Texas is best practices and leading in the nation. New York Times is saying that they're leading in the nation on ending homelessness. So I want you all to know that you have resident experts here in the room, and hopefully we'll be able to answer all of your questions.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure between the three of you, but would one of you like to, okay, Stacy, thank you, take responsibility for walking through the request. One thing I will add is just as some general context, we have had a performance review done by Stacy and her colleague, Andronika Morris, who's also nationally known in the top world of affordable housing, on our homeless practices and a performance review. And many of these recommendations align to the findings and the guiding principles around putting a greater focus on chronic homelessness and moving people who tend to be harder to house into housing. So with that, Stacy?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. As was already pointed out today, these are one-time funds, and they are extraordinary. But because they are one-time funds, we need to be creative and we need to be effective and make sure that the funds are going to be something that is sustainable and leaves an ongoing legacy here in Nashville. And so I'll start with the first 25 million, which is set aside to do gap funding for developments that are already underway and have all of their stacking in place so that we can fill a gap that has been left by either insurance or the volatile cost of materials. And so there are a number of developments that are already underway or about to close that have a new gap. And so we would use this money to basically buy affordability at 30% for people living at 30% of AMI or below, or provide set-asides within that development for PSH. And we have a number of developers that have indicated that they are very interested in doing this. The great thing about it is that these are low-cost loans. These are not grants that are going to be given to developers. So there will also be program income that will be generated by these funds, and that can continue to go back into the creation of more affordable units and to assure that there are set-asides in some of these big multifamily developments coming up for permanent supportive housing. And that's important because currently in Nashville, the majority of your permanent supportive housing is site-based, which limits the choice that people have and can sometimes be stigmatizing because people can refer to a building as, oh, that's where the homeless live, or, that's where the elderly live. And so it's important that in every city you have a really good mixture of housing choices for people, because just because people are experiencing homelessness, even if they're chronically homeless with serious and persistent mental illnesses, they still have a preference. They still know where they would like to live, and they deserve to have the greatest choice possible. And so this particular fund increases all of that and creates a small income stream. 25 million is not a tremendous amount, but we have a great partnership with MDHA, and they'll be releasing the notice of funding availability for this. And once again, there will be more details to follow. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering, because some of these bullet points are decently complicated, and I'm wondering if we can take questions after each, instead of going through the whole thing and then coming back, because it, in my brain anyway, gets a little muddled.
Sure.
So these would be privately owned developments that are subsidized, correct?
Yes.
For a certain period of time?
Yes, ma'am.
Through loans?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what percentage of these developments would then add the subsidized unit and the PSH part of it? Or is that one and the same?
No, they're actually two different things.
That's what I thought.
So
Okay.
that is a very good question. And the truth is that is something that we'll be working out. We put this together, and I think that we're going to have a good response. I think it's important to have a good mixture in there. And I am not an underwriter or the expert at underwriting. And so we'll be working with the staff at MDHA to figure out what the best mixture is to continue to give the city, what it needs to continue to move forward towards meeting our goals.
Okay. What happens to the money? Because it's a loan, so it will clearly be coming back to us with a small percentage of profit.
It's called surplus cash, but yes.
Yeah, so what happens, so there's going to be some accountability with where the first $25 million goes.
Yes,
But where's
absolutely.
the accountability when that money comes back to us? Because I'm assuming that it's a sustainable model where the money is just sort of constantly ebbing and flowing, right? So who manages that? Where's that accountability ongoing?
I'm going to let Amal answer.
Let's hear.
Is he on?
Just a moment, he will be. Let's try that. Mal?
Email Alexander, Director of Community Development at MDHA. As Stacy has mentioned, we're still in sort of the beginning phase of developing this, but we already award loans to developers for affordable housing projects. And we have a system in place where we track program income and we report on that on an annual basis. And actually that report is presented out to the community and we open ourselves up for public comment and questions about those funds.
Okay. One of my concerns about our affordable housing that we do is that it's not forever. So the affordable housing aspect of any development, when you have a private developer, ends when the subsidy ends. And then you just have apartments or whatever it is that goes right back to market rate. So 20 to 25 years from now, we're back in the same spot as it relates to that particular development. So you're constantly having to fill that need. It's a long time from now, sort of. I feel like 20 years just flew by. But so that's sort of my concern, is that anytime you have private developers, 100% that affordability aspect of it goes away as soon as the subsidy goes away, because they're going to get what they're going to get. If market rate is $1,000 a month, they're going to get that, whether it comes 100% from the renter or if a combination of government support, whatever. So that's another reason why I think part of this affordable housing thing is it's just not a very sustainable model in my just overall. But I do the permanent supportive housing, which I love that, because that's part of the problem, is that housing doesn't always alone solve homelessness. There's a reason why they're homeless. In fact, the definition that was put in here, an unaccompanied individual with a disabling condition, a disabling condition. So the disabling condition is what's causing the homelessness. So unless we're addressing the disabling condition, whatever it is, we're not truly solving homelessness. Yes, we're putting a roof over their head, but not sustainably. So when the permanent supportive housing aspect goes away, because this is not forever, then what?
So I think, I mean, number one, you're asking great questions, and a little bit further in the document, there's the supportive services that are needed to sustain people in housing, and we can get to that later. And so you're right. Very often, when developments when their affordability period runs out, they will revert to market. However, there are other developers out there that are nonprofit developers that tend to try to keep a good mix. Often, and Amal, you can come up, but in my experience at the state, very often when we had buildings that were reaching the end of their affordability period but had other needs that occurred, they can come back to renegotiate for renovation or whatever in order to keep it affordable. So it doesn't all go away. The set-asides for permanent supportive housing, and then I'm going to let you speak, Amal, I'm hoping that once Nashville has really good housing first case management in place, and we're making that sustainable, that developers will begin to realize what a benefit it is to them, because they are assured of rent. They have somebody that that can speak to them about the client and address issues as they occur. And in many other states, you see a great deal of even for-profit developers that go out of their way to keep a mix of permanent supportive housing within their developments. So I'm gonna, Amal, do you wanna?
No, I think you basically covered it. One thing to consider is a lot of these developers are mission-based developers. So sometimes they may come back to us again for additional funding to keep the properties affordable.
Good, thank you. All right, I see Councilmember Gamble, then Sarah, and then Councilmember Sepulveda.
Thank you. Just for clarification, it sounds like MDHA has a program already in existence similar to this. Is this a new program, or is this a request for funding for the current program? And also, how is this different from the Catalyst program? And that be something for the administration to answer. But the Catalyst Fund that we have that provides support for developers or incentives for developers to build affordable housing. How is this different from that?
That was kind of a bunch of questions, I think. I'd like to go back because I should have written down the first part of your questions, but I remember this is something that is new. It is strictly to prioritize services that will be accessed. These units will be accessed through coordinated entry. They will require HMIS participation. So it is strictly for homeless services, and the program income continues to go back into units or services for permanent supportive housing. Mel?
That is correct. So this is a new GAP program, and we also want to consider that we receive a small amount of funding through our home program, about $2.5 million each year, and that's not nearly as much as we're being recommended with this recommendation. So.
Okay. And then, yes, I just want to close out the question about Catalyst Fund, if that's all right.
Thank you. For the Catalyst Fund, that is really intended to help developers access financing very quickly to purchase housing that is at risk of being lost. So if we've got some naturally occurring affordable housing that's on the market, right now our existing funding sources are usually through federal programs that require a whole lot of hoops before you can close on a property. So it's to make that more nimble. The program that Stacy is proposing, or that MHIT is proposing through this, is to really tap into what's under construction. When we're looking at having to tackle 5,000 new units every year, we need every possible resource. But one of the biggest things is that we structure that we're not double putting funds in. So if you're a Catalyst developer, this is not a tool for you, and vice versa.
How do you determine which is which? So this is more mission developer?
It's really for the developer to decide what they want to do, and we just have tools for them to tap into. But we have program requirements that are created to say, if you get this, this is the level of affordability that you commit to for a period of time. Okay. You can't access other public funds if we feel like that we shouldn't be leveraging within the city, but leveraging with other resources, so that we're maximizing our resources for all types of developers. We've got nonprofits, we've got for-profits, we've got all sorts of different folks in this community, and actually looking to tap into our community, that we need to make as many tools available.
Thank you for that clarification. I just want to make sure that we're not duplicating programs and services. We've already made an allocation of $20 million into the Catalyst Fund, so just trying to differentiate the difference. Thank you.
If it's helpful, perhaps what we could do is work in the follow-up documentation to lay out both the MDHA programs underway, and again, because some of this is also giving confidence in the capacity that we have for management of these things. So the MDHA programs we have underway that are similar, but how they're different, and then this program, and then the Catalyst Fund. So we'll take that as a follow-up. Very good. Representative Love, I saw your hand was up. I didn't know if it was building off of Councilmember Gamble's questions. Otherwise, it was with Sarah and then Councilmember Sepulveda in the queue. Is it? It's its own new question. Okay, if you don't mind, I'll add you to the list. Let's move over to Sarah. Yes, Ms. Finley.
Yeah, this is just a request as the details are fleshed out. To me, it's a little bit hard to follow this description and to know how we can be assured that there would be a 20 to 35 period of these being affordable units. I don't know if that's, contingent on an agreement at the time of the loan. I don't know. But Nashville has a lot of different issues right now, but one of them obviously is that there's not enough supply for the demand, and that's why rents are going up, and it's why housing prices are going up. So, you could very easily get to an economic situation where, the loan is not the best thing to keep outstanding. So I just want to know what the teeth would be in terms of ensuring the affordability aspect of this program.
So the teeth are all in the contract. I mean, it is an actual document, and Mal, you can come up, but lawyers on both sides are looking at it. The underwriting is reviewed, and the teeth are, there's always recapture, in the event that, they don't honor their part of the deal, but that is really quite rare.
Yep.
And most developers that are savvy enough to use LIHTC or new market tax credits to layer development understand everything about it, and their ability to continue to do business in good faith with any agency that provides that type of subsidy know that they need to really stay on the straight and narrow and honor every aspect of their agreement. Amel, do you want to add?
I'll just add that we have a compliance team, and they monitor these projects annually, and we require reporting from developers each year on the project and to ensure that it's in compliance.
And, it would be helpful to just sort of, if there are some examples of programs like this that have really stood the test of time, just because I know developers can come and go and different things happen economically to a property site, especially in a thriving economy like Nashville has. And it just causes me some concern if we don't really do our work to make sure that we've got, something that we really know is going to deliver on what we think we're trying to achieve.
So I can tell you, or bring you examples from the state of Louisiana, the state of Texas, and other areas where in their QAP, their qualified allocation plan, the state does set aside always for affordable housing. And they've all stood this test of time. And I think that it's been standing the test of time here in Nashville already, if I'm not mistaken. MDHA has been doing loans for ever?
Well, certainly before my time, but we have a 20-year compliance on our home loans, so we are responsible for ensuring those loans stay in compliance during that compliance period.
We're thinking more like a 30 or 35 year on this one, but yeah.
Good, thank you. Councilmember Sepulveda.
Great. And thank you all for being here. I know that we still have a lot of work to do when it comes to helping our unhoused neighbors. So I do have a couple of questions. I guess the first one would be, who are the developers? Have you all identified specific developers, or is that a process that will be opening?
It's a process that would open by the announcement of an RFP, and but I have been talking to developers and about whether or not there are gaps out there among developments, and my understanding is that it is very frequent that there are gaps out there because of once again, the volatility in materials. The cost of insurance continues to fluctuate, and I've rarely seen developments that didn't end up with a gap in some way or form, but it will be done competitively. It will be monitored by MDHA,
And that goes through our procurement process here at Metro, correct?
I believe it'll have
no,
to be through MDHA because we can't do loans. And correct me if I'm wrong there, Amel, but that would be through their procurement process.
Got it. Since it's not going through our Metro procurement process and through y'all, I guess this would be a moment to highlight that we need to make sure that, we're aware that there are some developers who have wage theft accusations and worker safety issues, and just keeping all of that in mind in general. But going back to this, there is an item that says housing specialists. So I guess my question is, how many housing specialists would there be? How many case managers would there be? Because I do agree that we need to make this holistic, right? And that we provide services. And I think that that's what we've done in our rapid rehousing. So my question is, how many we're planning to have?
So that's actually another bullet, but if you want to, I can go there. So I think it's important to note that not every single client requires the same amount of case management. And it's important to have teams that, number one, include peer specialists. To me, they are some of the most important members of any type of Housing First case management team. And some of the people that are housed may require weekly visits of a multi, I'm losing the word, of a team that has doctors, you know, social workers and peer specialists. Some of them may require, you know, just a meeting with the case manager and the social worker. And so that is something that we will work on. As you notice down here, there is $9 million dedicated to building capacity in Housing First supportive services. I think that's an area where, you know, Nashville could definitely use some help building those services. I've met with developers that are actually willing to take clients right now, as long as we can assure them that we have good case management that they'll be able to keep in touch with, because a lot of these developers are doing business in other states as well and are familiar with having PSH within their developments, because a lot of the other states QAP requires it.
Yeah. So I guess my last thing would be if we could have this before the Homelessness Planning Council. I know we've had a version of this before, but having the providers weigh in, since a lot of them will be bidding and contributing to this effort if it is funded. And basically, because I think there is some disagreements between the two groups of how to approach certain things, specifically like Jefferson Street encampment being one of them. And so I think it would be good to have that conversation. So I don't know if that could happen at our next meeting before this comes back to the ARP committee.
So you asked some great questions, and I'm actually glad you brought it up. So the plan is we do have newly assigned first-class HUD TA to also help us with this implementation. And the goal is to engage not just the Planning Council, but to broaden it to the agencies of the COC and the community in which people are going to be received, and the business community and philanthropy. Because at the end of the day, if you want people to be successful and you want them to thrive, they need to be able to assimilate into a community that accepts them. And the best way to do that is to start educating everybody. And so I think that the process for this, we plan to actually make much broader and more inclusive, but also very transparent. So yes, we will be bringing it to the Planning Council. We're going to be bringing it to the COC meetings, and we hope to see all of you at bigger meetings where we have, I mean, April mentioned Houston, but the truth is Milwaukee is down to 17 homeless people, chronically homeless people, 17. That is extraordinary. You know, Houston did a lot of work, and in Atlanta we had the woman that helped them do that from CSH come in, and it's really all about planning, engagement, and having everybody have a respectful, complete dialogue where everybody's voice is able to be heard, and where we come to a consensus. At the end of the day, there's never going to be a point in time when you develop a plan like that, that everybody is like, oh God, this is the best thing since sliced bread. You know, everybody's going to like a little of it and not like a little of it. But what we need to make sure we're doing is that as it goes on, that we monitor it to make sure it's performing, to make sure that the needle's being moved. You can't just talk about something. You have to put it into action. So we'll be doing that. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Stacy. Would it be possible maybe if, I'm going to imagine that this entire engagement process couldn't be accomplished in a month, but perhaps we could put down on paper some of the plans for that?
Yes,
and
ma'am.
the HUD TA assignment for it, and at least bring that into the documentation. All right. Representative Love.
Thank you again. Let me follow, if I can, this process. The $25 million is a loan to developers, and the income from what they pay back on the loan will be used to either build homes for homeless persons or provide services for them, correct?
Yes, sir.
I would like to see a breakdown of what percent of the income is going to repay the loan, and then what percent is going to the program. Because I think that's important to note, because otherwise it's just a loan that never gets repaid, and it's just...
Right. And Mel, you might be better than me at explaining surplus cash, but the truth of the matter is that they pay out of their surplus cash. So after they have covered their top line, then Mel's finance department works with them. Please take over, because I'm really drowning here.
Well, a lot of it, I'm sure we have to work out when we develop the RFA and really get into the program details. But I know the way the program was previously structured in Louisiana, folks paid out of 50% of surplus cash each year from the development, and that funds went to repay the proceeds from the loan. The developer pays back the loan from 50% of the surplus cash that is available on the property. On the project, I'm sorry, each year.
But each project makes, okay, so every year you have, let's say I'm a developer. So every year, you know, I have to budget for all of the things that go into maintaining the building and keeping it going. And so you have just a budget for that. And I call it the top line of the development. So once they've paid their insurance, they paid maintenance costs, they pay whatever they're going to pay. Am I doing a bad job, Emil?
I mean, it's management fees, utilities, whatever other loans they have on the property, whatever's left from that, they pay from 50% of that surplus cash goes to pay back the loan. So if that is $10,000 at the end of each year, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, then they would pay 50% of that back to pay the loan until the loan is paid off.
And then I guess the other $5,000 would go toward the program.
The way it was, and Stacey, you can jump in on the Louisiana program.
And I'm just using that example. If we hypothetically had $10,000 in surplus cash and $5,000 went to repay the loan, the other $5,000 would go toward this program to provide the services and possible housing for homeless.
I don't know if I understood. So after they paid off, and so it depends on the development, it depends on the mix in the development. And so we can write something up.
And it may be how it's worded here, because the wording is program income generated from these loans will be dedicated to housing and or services. And so, not to do a deep dive today, but just as a request, if we can come back with a breakdown of how that actually works would be helpful.
Sure, and we can do that. I can tell you that the state of Louisiana, off of Katrina money, makes millions every year in program income. This is $25 million, and so the income is not going to be that great. And the surplus cash also depends on, let's say, if you have a building that is a majority of the units are deeply affordable, then the surplus cash may not be as high as it would be for a building that has a lot of market rate or whatever. So it depends on the mix. But the units still remain dedicated for the period of affordability.
And again, I think it's the wording, because the wording gives me the perception that several things are going on. One, there's a $25 million loan to developers to develop housing, just general housing. And then the income from that loan goes to create other housing for homeless, right? And so that's, the wording appears to be leaning toward that. What you just said made it appear as though in the developer's building, there's going to be affordable housing also.
Yes,
That's right.
that's correct.
Okay,
That's
all right.
correct. So maybe Representative Love, we can document this better about what does a loan look like? What are the examples of requirements that come with the loan? And then how does that mean, what does that turn into each year in terms of the loan payments? And then that turns into program
Right.
income, which then gets allocated into further loans one day or into the supportive housing stream. If that makes sense, we can work through an illustration on that.
Yes.
But I see
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnston's hand up.
Wait, amendments.
Yeah, and I think we jumped a little bit too quick there because we hadn't sort of worked out the repayment terms for the loan, but I
Right.
think that's something we should come back with and report out on what makes sense once we sort of flesh this out a bit more. But I did want to clarify that the repayment is technically the program income. So the 50% that they're
Right.
paying above surplus cash, we're collecting that, and that's program income.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the whole surplus cash thing is what's throwing me off, because when you talk about surplus cash, that means over and above what? So what else are we subsidizing? Because to me, a loan is, okay, for example, just keeping it simple, I'm giving out a $25 million loan. Let's just say it's one developer. $25 million loan, and I'm going to charge him 1%. So each year, or when he repays that, right, that's $250,000, 1% on 25 million. But now we're talking about, well, it's not necessarily 250,000 because it's going to be 50% over surplus because they've got maintenance and all this. Like, I know on my mortgage, I don't get to take out my repairs and cost of operating my house before I pay back the loan. Like, so a loan is a loan, and then further subsidies that reduces your payment back is a whole different thing. And especially when we're talking about gap financing. So not even the whole development is going to be affordable / permanent supportive housing. It's going to be 5%, 10%, 20%, whatever it is y'all figure out. So, but the gap financing is for the entire development, right? So you're helping to finance to get over the hump the entire development, which includes market rate, but then we're going to reduce back the payment at 50% after surplus. What? I'm lost. This makes zero sense to me. Like we're laughing, but I'm not really laughing.
I understand.
Because we're talking about $25 million of a gift that we want to make sense.
Right.
I think again, if we could diagram this out,
we can.
what is the developer getting? What are they signing up for as example requirements? What does that turn into as an example into the loan payments? Let's call it the loan payments as they're coming through. And then those loan payments are program income, and how are those being utilized? I think that's, and I apologize for smiling.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
And we can share with you other
sympathizing because I
programs and
understand
how they
you got
work.
lost.
And
Okay.
some of that is HUD speak or whatever we call it within a program. And so it teaches me to be careful about the language that I use. So
Yeah, don't start throwing out new stuff. We can't. Thank you.
I think it makes sense just to come back and bring
Yeah.
back something with a little bit more specifics.
I think
Yep.
a good diagram
Yep.
of how the money is moving
Yeah.
and what the requirements are around it for you all. Absolutely.
Oh, and can we take these separately as well? So as far as like resolutions, instead of
Correct.
one lump sum to homelessness, because this is homelessness because of the permanent supportive housing aspect of it, but a lot of this is actually fancy for affordable housing.
No, it's deeply affordable housing. So this is for people who make 30% of the area median income. So this is deeply affordable, and you do not really have a lot of that here in Nashville.
We know for sure. Yeah, I still want to take each one of
Yeah,
these
I
as a
got it.
separate resolution. Thank you.
The only recommendation I'd say is if you don't mind, we'll go back and look at this. I want to make sure you don't separate some things out that need to be together, right? Like if we
Yeah,
take
sure.
the supportive services away from the housing component,
Yeah,
I'd be concerned about that, but we can work through that further. All right, thank you. All right, Stacy, would you like to move on to the Housing First Supportive Services,
Sure.
which again are, if you could speak to that, how tightly coupled this is with the $25 million?
So this is $9 million for Housing First Supportive Services, and that would be ACT, ICM, which is Intensive Case Management. I also put SOAR in here because SOAR helps get people signed up for mainstream benefits, and it's all part of the supportive services that you need when you're working with people. And so these would also be competitive grants. This is not a loan, these are competitive grants, and they are specifically to build capacity because once again, as somebody said earlier, this is an extraordinary amount of money and we want to make sure that the money continues to work for us. And so they will be put out as competitive grants either through the Homeless Impact Division or in concert with one of our healthcare partners that may be better at putting out this type of grant, one of the FQHCs, which is a federally qualified health clinic. It's important that we try to target this money towards agencies that are already billing Medicaid. I do not see Tennessee becoming an expansion state anytime soon. We are pushing and hoping that we'll be able to advocate for some waivers that will make the provision of these services better and continuous. But in order to make this as sustainable as possible, it's important that we put them out as grants to agencies that are already licensed to bill Medicaid. That's our best chance of sustainability. Otherwise, we build dependency as opposed to sustainability.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you. So and I agree with the sustainability aspect of it and having programs that are already have the ability to bill Medicaid. I guess my question is, if they're already able to bill Medicaid, so what is the $9 million going to? Is it to fill the gap? Because I know sometimes the cost of providing a service is X and Medicaid pays this. Or is that where the $9 million is another gap funding? Or are we just incentivizing them to take on a certain population? Or my thing is, if they're already billing Medicaid, why aren't they providing the services already?
Well, and that's a great question. Once again, it also kind of ties back to the fact that you are not currently an expansion state, and so your Medicaid reimbursement is not that high, and it's also capped. And so what this allows agencies to do is to get a number of teams in place and to start working on their own sustainability plan, which would include Medicaid, but it would also include trying to find grants from other mental health providers, SAMHSA. The whole homeless continuum of care needs more partnership with philanthropy and other agencies so that we can, and the state, in order to make sure that we have the best services possible.
Also, caseloads are extremely high for like mental health facilities or mental health agencies. Caseloads are extremely high based on that reimbursement rate from Medicaid. So for this population, the most vulnerable, higher levels of chronic disabling conditions, this will allow for them to have smaller caseloads. So I know you playfully said gap, but it is kind of gap because it will allow for them to have smaller caseloads, provide more intensive services instead of what Medicaid is reimbursing for, like one case manager per 100 clients. You know, of course, you're not really able to move the needle on helping that individual or that family at that caseload level.
My concern is that, for example, if we're talking about one caseworker per 100,
We're not.
that's not great, and we want to reduce that, right? Or whatever, increase the,
Right.
not have that high of a ratio, right?
Each ACT team serves about 100 people, and that's not 100 total because people flow in and out every year, but this should provide for at least 3.
Right, but my question is for how long? Because again, $9 million,
Right,
and this
so-
isn't a sustainable model, it's a grant. So
It's a-
then what?
So that's why it's a grant for a certain period of time for them to start building their sustainability plan. And so when the grant is reviewed, it's going to be reviewed for not just how you're going to bring people on, how quickly, what are the qualifications. It's also going to be reviewed on what is your plan for sustainability? What has your agency show us how your agency's been able to raise money to sustain other services. How do you plan to partner even with the rest of the agencies that are providing the housing? So it all comes together, and it's something new. And so I wouldn't call it an incentive. It is really something that is designed to build capacity. It's 3 years of funding so that we can build capacity.
I want to differentiate between what I said. Currently, it's one case manager per 100.
Right.
But this would be 100 per entire ACT team or intensive case management team, not just one person being responsible for 100 people.
Right. I just want to make sure, when you guys come back with some more detailed stuff based off of this conversation, if you can give some examples of how this has been successful in Louisiana or wherever else, just because I think this is huge. This is where we are identifying and treating the underlying cause, not just the symptom. Homelessness is a symptom of a bigger problem. So where you solve homelessness, in my opinion, is cutting out the cancer, right? And the cancer is the underlying problem. So I want to fund this, and I want this to be successful, but I want it to be sustainable and effective as well.
So I'm actually hoping you'll participate in some of the sessions. On my team, I have Sam Simbaris, who actually wrote the book on permanent supportive housing, Housing First, permanent supportive housing case management. And so I welcome participation. We will make sure to notify you and give you information as it continues to go on, but it is key. This is how you help people retain their housing.
Right.
Sam often says it's housing first, not housing only. Yeah. So that's where we really need to make sure that we're caring for people.
Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, and I agree with Councilmember Johnston that this is, in my opinion, the most important part of the proposal that I've seen so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it fleshes out as far as what kind of wraparound services. Well, first, let me say, who would be the coordinating agency for this? I realize you'll be working with community partners in delivering services, which I think is a smart idea. We have agencies on the ground doing this work. However, I think the point has been stated earlier. What we don't have in the city is a coordinating agency to make sure that we're following up, to make sure that the accountability piece is there, to make sure that we're really hitting the services and the people that we need to. So who would it be the Homeless Impact Division? Who would be the coordinating agency?
So In the report, I did recommend that there be an Office of Homeless Services. And so there is currently a search out for a nationally qualified executive director, because you're right. Somebody needs to make sure that we are driving performance. That is actually a job of the governing council, which here is the HPC. You know, there should be a data quality analysis going on. There should be analysis of how people are meeting their goals in our plan to end homelessness. Take a look at some intervention and you think, okay, they haven't been spending their money. This is not moving the needle. We need to put this over here with a program that is actually moving the needle. I mean, you do have a lot of what you need. You really don't have a lot of good case management here, but you have a lot of great agencies that are working their hearts out. And then you have some extraordinary healthcare agencies that need to be engaged, I think, more deeply and really made an absolute partner in this process, as well as the state mental health and the state housing authority. And so this is not something that any government can do alone, but there has to be an office where somebody is charged with, has the authority, I think I've said this a couple of times in my report, has the authority, the responsibility, and most of all, the accountability. Right. And we need to hold people's feet to the fire. Because you can talk about it all day long, but unless you do something, it's not going to move the needle.
Great. So I'm happy to hear that you all are thinking about that and have
Yes,
that
ma'am.
in the full proposal. Also, and this is probably will be addressed in the proposal, but it'll be helpful to know what kind of wraparound services, mental health, substance abuse, workforce development, and if there, and I guess my question is, has there been any talk or discussion about a reentry program? I know that in talking with MNPD and others,
Yes.
learned that there's a need for whenever homeless are picked up or helped with anything, whether it's mental health services, for example. They're taken to a mental health facility or whatever. When they're released, then they're just released back out on the street, and then it's a revolving door. So is there we need some type of reentry program?
Absolutely. And I believe once again in my report I referenced that corrections needs to be one of the agencies at the table, and people like Dr. Laura Mims in her program that serve people that are reentering the community. It is the utmost importance. And so that would also be part of what we would call diverting people from the front door of homelessness, right? So, in that HUD definition of homelessness, what I didn't put in there is HUD lets you be in jail for a little while before they consider you, but after 90 days, you're not counted as chronically homeless anymore if you're in an institution. And so it's important that we have plans, that we have a number of concentric tracks that are very complicated. And once again, it's the reason why we need a unified and coordinated leadership to keep driving this train down the track, because everything's important.
One last question. How does this align with the Homeless Commission's plans and ideas? And probably Councilmember Sepulveda might be able to speak to that too. But has there been any collaboration with the Homeless Commission in developing this plan?
So I actually am also glad that you asked that. I did talk to a number of different people, and one of the questions I asked, what do you think's working well? What do you think we need? So that went into it. I have to say that MDHA for the home, ARP, did probably one of the best jobs I've seen of gathering input from all the agencies, all the community stakeholders, and I mean, all of them are fairly consistent. Not only do we need subsidies for units, and case management, but we need actual units that are able to accept us. So all of the above, and then data from HMIS, Greg Shin that did the data work for the report that we did, projected the number of units that we would need over time based on what Dr. Beth Shin probably correctly pointed out, that we have an undercount of homelessness here. All stuff that needs to kind of move together so that we can, do a better job, try to get the most accurate count, but so that we have a system that's set up that, is not a one-trick pony. It's a system that is set up to address the complexity of it, and has the flexibility to meet people where they are. Not just say, oh, you need to go here or you need to go there. We need to be able to address people's needs and meet them where they are, and make it way more client-centered as opposed to agency-centered.
Yes, Councilmember Sepulveda.
Great. I guess what was proposed to us, what was presented to us was slightly different, and that's why I suggested it coming back to us. I think mainly the underlining differences in opinion is the way we are housing people, in that there was very much pushback, and you all would agree, of not just closing down an encampment, and there was concerns of people being skipped in line in the process that were in line to get housing. So that's a disagreement that the Homelessness Planning Council has currently. And that's why I think it's important that we have this discussion in the Planning Council.
So, absolutely. And once again, I will say that was also addressed in the plan, because the truth is a by name list is not made to be a list that goes in order. It's a list that fluctuates based on need in the community. And I agree with you 100%. We probably need to retool that coordinated entry process. HUD guidance requests that you house those with the greatest need who have been homeless for the longest. So what, and so you have to find a way to prioritize people. But HUD also does support the rehousing of individuals in encampment. And once again, we have new TA, and that is also a process for gaining community consensus and working together to do it and do it correctly. But housing people out of encampments is actually a best practice. It is not something that any of the best practice cities shrink from.
Yeah, I guess the difference is that people get moved. You're right. People have been getting moved up in the priority when encampments are being closed. And so that in itself seems to be the disagreement. And then, so it's just a differences of opinions, I guess.
It's actually, I don't know that maybe it's a difference of opinion. I mean, we're going based off of HUD guidance and what's worked in other cities. And so I think that when camps close and you have the opportunity to connect with and make a deep enough relationship with somebody that's living there to get them to move somewhere and agree to take housing. And these are people that are the hardest to house.
I just think that the priority really has been centered around neighborhoods who do not look like minority neighborhoods. I'll say it that way, because then we were called something when we said that they were white. So I think the priority has taken place around those neighborhoods and their needs sometimes, and we have potentially lost people in the process of getting them housed as they are being removed from the Jefferson Street encampment.
I would love to have a conversation at another date, and I think April can give you information on that, the fact that most of those people remain housed. And then we can just talk more about, at some point, how to really prioritize, because it should not be the neighborhood that drives it. It should be the need, a health and safety need or something like that. So, once again, we are going to look at doing it and doing it right and engage, the agencies of the COC as well as the Planning Council in order to get it done. But in order to be able to have choice to offer these individuals, right? Because you don't want to say, hey, you got to leave from here and you have one choice. You can go to the Mission or, whatever. We need to have a number of options so that we get the best outcome, because in addition to good case management being important for them retaining housing, to move people who have been long-time homelessness, and I can tell you, I just did a survey of the homeless camps. I had outreach workers and officers. There are a number of people out there that have been homeless for over 5 years. That is an extraordinary amount of time. And so it speaks to our not only needing better case management, but to better engage with people in order to assure that they are willing and or trust us enough to accept what we are offering.
I think all of this is really important foundational conversation, but I just want to time check and make sure that we're moving through these next pieces. It actually was.
Santa talk too much?
No, not at all. See, I think you have so much wisdom to impart to us that we're appreciating that. I will say that this does set up the next couple pieces, I think, quite nicely. Cece, if you want to talk about the low barrier gap housing and the remaining pieces here, if you don't mind.
So I think $9,000 total for low barrier gap housing, and this is temporary interim housing. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. I have the Invisalign braces. Sometimes that's no. Anyway, this is temporary interim housing for families and individuals as they await their housing placement, okay? And the reason that we decided to go with temporary, because a number of communities, I think around the country, look at building non-congregant or low barrier shelters. Well, those are all great ideas, but then you have to think about how are we going to sustain that type of thing? Because number one, you have the hard cost of just the bricks and sticks to get it done and build it. And then as somebody that ran a well-staffed shelter, I can tell you that your staffing fees are going to be like about $1.5 million a year. And so if we can find a way to partner with some hotels and all of the agencies of the COC and bring in some temporary housing that can be brought in and moved out, and somebody else has to pay, all the repairs, et cetera, on it, then Nashville is better off. It sets us up to be able to move quickly, to be able to offer people a choice about where they're going to stay and offer them facilities that have a bathroom and a closet where they can hang their clothes, and in some of them even a washer and dryer where they can wash their clothes regularly. And I think all of that is important because this needs to be done with consideration to the humanity and dignity of each of these people that we're trying to serve. So.
Yes, Councilmember Sepulveda.
Thank you. So I know that there's some hotels/motels that are currently being used for rapid rehousing. Would this be under, this would be under us and not HUD, right? So I know when it's under HUD, there are specific, specific requirements of not disclosing information, location, et cetera. Would that apply to this?
I think you're maybe talking about domestic violence, and not sure. I mean, we can, so these are treasury funds, so there is a little bit more flexibility. However, I think that we are going to go with national best practice of very low barrier. It's like you agree to come in, you agree not to sell drugs here, you agree, you know, not to use drugs on the property, and, you know, to treat the neighborhood with respect, and you're here, and we're going to take care of you, and we're going to help you figure out what you need in order to be your best self and where you may want to live. So, you know, HMIS is an absolute 100% requirement unless they happen to be domestic violence survivors, and that would be actually just a different agency. So, you know, all of the program requirements that we need in order to be able to actually look at our data and tell how well is Nashville doing. You know, how good is our data? And so for every new program that comes on, it has to go into the HMIS system, because we need to be able to see, have we shortened the overall length of time that people, the average length of time that people stay on the streets in Nashville? Have we improved people's living situations? Have they gotten an increase in income? Have they been connected to mainstream benefits? All of the things that HUD looks at to see how well we're performing. And one of those things is the length of time that people spend on the street. And so I think I give you a very long answer.
All right,
so.
Councilmember Johnston has a question. Stacey.
So I think Councilor Sepulveda, she mentioned the rapid rehousing, which I'm sure you know, or I hope you know, of what we're doing currently with rapid rehousing here in Nashville. Okay, is that what this is? Or because rapid rehousing, my understanding of it anyway, is that we rent all of the motel rooms or hotel rooms, and they cycle in and out as, you know, they come in for however long they need to be there, up to a year. I guess that can be extended if they find permanent housing in 3 months, 6 months, whatever. But the goal is at least at the end of the year that they have moved on, they're on their own 2 feet. I don't think that's what this is.
No, it is not.
Okay.
And it is not. And truthfully, rapid rehousing was not really meant to be used with hotels. I mean, I think that you're doing it here because of the lack of affordable housing stock, but rapid rehousing was actually meant to move people rapidly off the street into an apartment, and then if they qualified for a subsidy, that subsidy would drop in, or if, you know, they just needed help getting on their feet for 4 months. And you can do rapid rehousing for varying lengths of time.
Yeah.
And so this is most definitely not rapid rehousing. This is meant to be interim, a place for people to stay and be safe and have all the things that they need around them.
And not high density.
Not exactly. Thank you.
Because I think that's where we have created challenges in that.
Exactly.
Yeah, the way we have executed, and I want to be on record as saying, the way that we have executed our rapid rehousing is a fiasco. It's an absolute fiasco. There's rampant criminal activity there. It's not an environment that is conducive to healing, to getting on your feet, to being supported in any way. There's an amazing amount of human trafficking going on. All of our nonprofit partners will tell you it's horrible. And so I hate that idea. And what you're saying is that we're not even doing it really the way that we're supposed to be doing it. So that makes me feel better a little bit. That
I wasn't exactly saying that because I think that everybody is out there trying to do the very best that they can. And the truth is that when you do have people in high density, sometimes criminal activity comes up. And so you do have to plan for that. But no, this is not what we're talking about doing. And I think the whole staff would like to have a talk with you offline about rapid rehousing, because I don't know that it's
I've helped several people. I've been to these properties. I've personally, so yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about whatever offline because we're time constraints, but yes, happy to.
I'm already in trouble for talking too much, I
Me
think.
too, probably.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Gamble. Oops, hold it, sorry.
Really quickly, hopefully, as you're fleshing out the details of the proposal, the low gap housing and the supportive services will work together. If someone is utilizing the barrier low gap housing, they should definitely be utilizing the supportive services to address
Absolutely.
those issues.
That
They
is-
should go together.
That is the point where you connect them and you start making the connection between case manager and an individual. And if we do it correctly, we'll be able to better engage people in the coordinated entry process, kind of figure out which intervention is going to be best for them in the long run, and start working with them immediately on their choices. That is the way that it's supposed to go. And I know I got 2 more things to go.
Yeah.
Here we go, Stacy.
Okay.
Low Barrier Housing Collective for $3 million.
So, yes, $3 million to build capacity, efficiency, and efficacy in low barrier housing collective within the Metropolitan Homeless Impact Division. My partner in crime, Samson Barra, says you ought to rename it the Housing First Housing Collaborative. So that's something people can think of. But it's really important to have a group of people, because this is a very expensive thing, that if all the agencies had to do it themselves, it would be an expense and a hard expense for them to bear. And so it's important to have somebody that is out there making connections with not just neighborhood landlords, but like the developers here in town. A lot of them actually are very willing to work with us as long as we have the case management and the other services that we have out there. It would also be something that we could use for, like the existing fund for security deposits, damage, and indemnification. The housing specialist would, and this is where it's really important. So once housing specialist finds, housing, and the other person has a case manager, the housing specialist still maintains a communication with the landlord and the case manager to make sure that everything is going on. Because once you get a landlord, once you get a developer, you want to keep them. And so you want to keep that relationship going, and the best way to do that is through ongoing communication. I also put in here some one-time funding, whether it's through the furniture bank or whatever, for furniture per household, because it's really kind of hard to believe that sometimes people move into their apartments, they get their apartment and they have no furniture. They may bring a blow-up mattress to the table. And so it's important for us to start thinking of ways to support them in building a house that they're going to want to stay in. And so I think furniture is important. Do y'all have questions on that one? Okay. So then I have another $4 million in competitive grant funds for local nonprofits, and those would be released through MHED. These are for the creation of high-fidelity Housing First programs or the conversion of many of our existing programs to Housing First programs. Once again, we have a lot of great providers that are out there, a lot of great and honest providers, because I was speaking to one of them, and he's a great guy, and he goes, I've really been taking the easiest to serve, and now we need to beef up our services so that we are going after those that are hardest to serve. And so this is for grants to help the agencies build capacity. I also put in here a small landlord participation fund. So for landlords that may have an apartment, but so every apartment that we put somebody into through the continuum of care or any of MDHA's voucher programs, they have to pass housing quality standards. And sometimes it's really small things that some of the smaller landlords can't afford to do, whether it's a fresh coat of paint, new socket things on the wall, fixtures in the back. Base plates, thank you. All of those things that sometimes need to happen before they can take people for permanent supportive housing. These grant programs could work to assist with that. And once again, Councilmember Sepulveda, we will definitely be working with all the agencies of the COC and with hopefully a bunch of landlords and the Planning Council in order to get this done.
All right, just checking to see if there are any further questions. Again, we have some room. If you have further ones, please also feel free to email them to both myself and Mary Jo. And what we'll do is we'll endeavor, given the amount of kind of follow-up and documentation we're looking for, we'll endeavor to get it to you guys at least a week before the next time we're together, which I believe is July 20th. So you will have at least a good amount of time to digest that and to ask any further questions. Just want to say thank you to you all. I appreciate that you can see the level of detail of thinking that's gone behind all these, and we'll be happy to follow up with any more detailed questions you might have. Okay, and I will commit, we will try to look at these as individual pieces, but you can see there's some interrelationships to them that we're going to have to identify and probably need to make sure we're reflecting on appropriately.
And Mel and I will get you more information on how home loans and CDBG loans work. You can tell that I should never have been a banker, right? So.
We had one more minor item on the agenda. There's no vote related to it, and I think if it's okay, we can defer it to next time because Mary Jo was going to bring it. There was just some clarification United Way wanted to have from the affordable child care grants that we've been doing in the access, that there is an unlicensed daycare center that's come to them, and they've are really impressed with them, but wanted to make sure that you all would be comfortable with somebody who was unlicensed receiving some of that funding versus not. So I'm going to just put that on the table, but I'm going to say it'll come back on in July. And I think there's more research that needs to occur on the different types of licensing that occurs out there, and if this falls under just a different category. Yes, Councilmember Gamble.
If I can just add to that, I've had some discussions with United Way and understand that this particular center is a large center, and actually they have 2 locations in the Southeast region. They mostly serve Hispanic population. They have native-speaking Spanish staff there, a very successful program. I'm not sure. They fall under a category of
Mother's Day Out programs.
Thank you, Mother's Day Out versus licensed child care center. I'm not sure what the difference is, so we'll need more clarification on that. But that we need to have a harder discussion about that, because this is a great program that can be duplicated and can be expanded. But I don't know what the difference is between what they're called and a licensed center. So
we'll table that for July, and we'll attempt to get you guys some more detail, but I just wanted to tee up that there is that coming as a topic for you too. And yes, Councilmember Sepulveda.
All right, just generally, so I have this for this sheet of paper. It says what's been approved is about 129.8 million. And what's left is 60,465 from the first half of the funding.
Correct.
And then for the ARP year 2, the total of this is 129, with everything that has been proposed to us by the administration. It's up the 14.8 for funds for evidence-based programs. And that, is there specific items for that, or is just that's what would be left if we approved all of the administration's budget?
If you approved all those other items, and that is just simply math, right? And that's just simply when you add up and subtract from 129. But I wanted to level set all of that with you now before you get to authorizations and decisions, right? Because if you have other intents for those funds that might be more than 14.8, want to make sure that we're thinking that through as early as possible and that we're bringing that into consideration for your very first decisions at this point in time.
Yeah, just because I want to keep it on the committee's radar that we didn't finish funding the Turk and JFON Immigration Services ask, and we didn't finish funding the eviction right to counsel remainder of the ask because our funds were running out, and so we have to wait on the second half. So I don't want us to forget that because I do think it's important that we finish that commitment.
I agree, and I think, again, all those are open for the will of body. You will also see a note there, and that is, if you don't mind, from Budget and Finance Chair Allen's request as well. There are 3 nonprofits she just wanted to put on the radar screen, 2 that have been under discussion in the Budget and Finance Committee FY23 budget operating process that she thought also could be interesting from an ARP perspective. Again, work very directly in recovery from challenges and disasters. Those are Hands-On Nashville, the Community Resource Center, and Second Harvest. There are no dollar amounts, but I did want to honor her request to pass that along as well to you. Very good. All right, well, with that, thank you very much. We'll be back together again on July 20th. And again, we'll endeavor at least a week in advance to get you a lot more of this more detailed documentation. Any questions before then, please send them along and we will bring that into the answer set as well. I really appreciate you all sticking through this long meeting with us, but hopefully a very good one. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.